From beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, it is the Neglected News Report. I'm your host, Scott Mitchell, along with my brother Kevin.
Welcome.
I always want to say beautiful downtown Phoenix, Arizona, because we're not downtown, we're uptown, and it's just a throwback to, well, if you're of a certain age, you'll get the reference.
Yeah, Phoenix really doesn't have a real downtown, a vital downtown. Everything's in the suburbs.
Oh, I don't know. It's been revitalized.
Well, it's better than it used to be, that's for sure.
Thanks to that demon, Jerry Colangelo. Jerry Colangelo's done more for the city than any dozen of people.
I believe so.
He actually revitalized the downtown by getting the Diamondbacks here, by getting didn't he help getting the
hockey team?
The hockey team, also getting the stadium built for the Suns.
Oh yeah, he was
the ballpark,
all responsible for that.
The arena
all
for the
surrounding
Suns.
all the surrounding restaurant businesses and everything.
I mean that downtown is. I mean, there was a time not too many years ago where if you were out there walking down the street in that area of town after sundown, you took your life in your hands.
A lot of homeless.
And it's so much better now. Mm-hmm. Well, to say that it's been an eventful week is a very big understatement.
The religion of peace strikes again. What was that?
That was my religion of peace yell.
Call. It sounded like a turkey.
And Syed, if you're listening to this, forgive me. He's a Muslim friend of mine. He's cool though.
Better watch what you say.
No, he's a reasonable Muslim.
So, where do you want to go with this? Okay. It's really, I do not want to desecrate the dead or anything, but the real story is not the dead, because that's a common theme anymore when it comes to terrorists. You know, there's people massacred constantly in the name of Islam. But what I find amazing is the reaction, is the politically correct response to this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Should we? Well, first of all, I think this is worth noting, and I was listening to Breitbart radio on the way over here, and this, I forget who the gentleman was on, who it was, his name, but he brought this up, and it really is profound. He said, do you remember in the 80s a lot, or 80s and 90s, you would hear a lot of black activists bemoaning the fact that, you know, when a little white girl is kidnapped, it's big news, but when a little black girl is kidnapped, it isn't. And he's absolutely correct. In the same sense, we're making a really big deal, as we should, don't get me wrong, about the murdered people in Paris, when Christians are being beheaded all over by the thousand by Muslims, whether it be ISIS, whether it be Boko Haram, how to pronounce it? Boko Haram in Africa. I mean that's it's a common everyday occurrence. I mean, children being beheaded.
They're trying to wipe out the Yazidis, which are an ethnic Christian group in Iraq.
Yeah, but you know, and it made me think. Yeah, I mean, if is a Western life, you know, a Western European or American life, is that worth more than, you know, a Yazidi life? And I say no, especially in God's eyes. He views us all the same. And I hate to inject religion in it, but sorry if you don't like it. But I was really amazed. Why should I be amazed anymore when leftists do what they do? Christian Amanpour.
Oh God!
You want to go into that?
Yeah. Why not? I read I know the article.
Yeah, you posted it on Facebook, and of course, because has to do with food or cats and dogs, we get absolutely no response from anybody on it when it's absolutely captivating and interesting. And Christian Amanpour referred to these terrorist murderers, because that's what they are, referred to them as activists.
Go ahead.
PETA are activists.
Greenpeace are activists.
Yeah, and you could even have said possibly that the Black Panthers were activists, although they used terrorist techniques as well. But what is going on? I was laying in bed this morning and I'm thinking to myself, are these just willfully ignorant, useful idiots, or is there something more sinister at play? What do you? I can't answer that question.
I think I think it's a combination of things. I think there's some willful idiocy involved. I think there's fear that if they were to actually name them for what they are, that they would be targeted in some cases.
Well, that's the whole aim of these people, is to shut you up.
Exactly. They're acceding to the wishes of the enemy. And I look at it kind of like, I was telling Kevin before, when he first got here today, I was saying, like, it's like when you're in the schoolyard as a kid, you got a bully that beats the snot out of you every day in the schoolyard. And you're there like, oh, well, he's just misunderstood. He's got problems at home, and you make every kind of excuse for them instead of calling him what he is, and that's a bully. Until you can call him what it is, you have no hope of defeating him. I think that's part of it too.
Well, I have no doubt that had this been some Christian fundamentalists going into a mosque, or it doesn't even have to be a mosque, it could be maybe a restaurant frequented by Muslims, and mowing a bunch of innocent people down, there would be none of this political correct talk.
What I find is ironic is the one person that's speaking out about it, the president of Egypt, El-Sisi.
Yes.
Abdel Fattah El-Sisi.
And that wonderful ex-Islamic woman who gets on there and basically, what's her name? She was on Christiane.
You had to do that to me. You had to do that.
She was on Uma Pamaraju's show today.
I know the woman you're talking about,
and she pulls no punches. She's a brave woman.
They got a fatwa out on her.
Well, they'd have to. She's a brave woman, and she was basically patting this guy on the back.
For those of you who don't know what a fatwa is, it's basically like. It's basically like a contract. It's like a contract, like the mafia would put out on someone. Salman Rushdie's got one out. He's had that on him for like 30 years now.
A long time. The Satanic Verses he wrote.
Yeah.
But it was basically critical of Islam.
And basically, from what I've heard, there was a fatwa out on people who worked at Charlie Hebdo.
Oh yes, yeah, because they something happened.
They printed
a year ago.
They printed the pictures of that Dutch cartoonist of Muhammad, for one thing.
Yeah, but something was. Wasn't there an attempted murder of one of them? Something happened.
Not sure.
But again, it's typical cowardice.
Yeah.
What was he wasn't Dutch. He was Danish, wasn't he? The cartoonist that was murdered in the streets
He might have been. Yeah, it might have been Danish.
He was stabbed to death.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, acts of cowardice, walk in and mow down 12 people with automatic weapons and an RPG, right. By the way. Like, really? An RPG?
Yeah.
They're not even armed. Or stab somebody in, walking down the street.
They just wanted to make sure. That's why I brought the RPG.
Yeah, they and of course they shoot the unarmed, which is funny in and of itself, police officer, while he's down right in the head. And why don't
they don't arm their cops there?
No, it
goes back to the old Robin Williams bit back in the days in Britain when the bobbies didn't carry guns.
Yeah.
He goes, well, what are you going to do after when you're chasing a criminal? Are you going to yell, "Stop"? Or I'll yell, "Stop again"? It's like that. Or you don't have any way to stop them.
It's ridiculous. What they do is they try to pretend that bad does not exist, that guns somehow are miraculously going to be disinvented and nobody's going to have them. I don't know it's crazy. It's crazy talk. It reminds me of in the 1970s and 80s when you'd have these anti-nuclear, the protesters. Sitting there talking about disarmament. Really? How do you disinvent something?
Or where you'd have...
The genie's out of the bottle.
Where you'd have Jackson Brown and his buddies chain themselves up at the nuclear plants.
Yeah, but and they feel so superior. It's the same thing with the gun control people. My Canadian friend says to me the other, there's just too many guns. I said, well, too many guns where? Here in the United States. I said, well, what's a perfect?
And
how many should we have?
Yeah, exactly. What are you basing it on? I mean,
yeah, it reminds me. Remember the movie Amadeus?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
When Mozart, when the Emperor of Austria asked Mozart to write an opera for him, he brings it back, and the Emperor looks at it, and he says, Mozart says, "So what do you think, sire?" He says, there's just too many notes. And Mozart says, "So which ones should I take out?" Exactly which ones, sire?
God, I haven't seen that movie for ages.
But it's the same thing. It's like this Canadian. You have too many guns. How many should we have?
I mean,
the gun. The people who own guns legally are not the ones that commit the crimes, for the most part.
Exactly. It's like, I don't want to bring this guy's name up because he listens. I've had this discussion with him at work. This guy I work with, I won't say, from the country that he's from. He says that they've got very strict gun laws. If you have an illegal gun, you're caught with it, you can get a life sentence. They had a famous actor who got 5 years.
Massachusetts go ahead.
But he says, and that's why, and I said, well, do you really think that criminals are going to care whether you got strict gun laws? He goes, well, yeah, they do.
What?
It's what he's saying, but I said, you guys, your crime rate is skyrocketing. But that's because this country has a very large population. But it's like...
It's in Chicago, mostly, where they have the strictest gun laws.
But it's like, you really think they're going to care?
I want to ask this particular person you're talking about, what do you think the chances of that same crime attempted here in the streets of Phoenix? What do you think the chances of an armed citizen?
It's mindset. It's a different mindset. It's a totally different mindset.
They become slaves. They've been
in this country mainly.
Yeah. There would be guns coming out of the woodwork.
Yep.
I mean, chances are there wouldn't have been such a massacre.
No, are you kidding me? If they tried to do something like that here in Arizona?
Yeah.
No, Arizona's got the most, it's been voted year after year as the most gun-friendly state in the country by the NRA. I don't think it's going to be happening.
I was having an adult beverage a few weeks ago with some...
Oh, no way.
Some friends of mine.
I didn't know you did that.
And out of the group of about 8 of us, 3 of us actually were armed at the moment. So, take it for what it's worth. We don't walk around like crazed, wild-eyed.
Exactly. Although we do live by the credo, lock and load, but no, we don't. We moved out here. It's going to be 43 years in March. 43 years ago, we moved to Arizona, March 21st, 1972. And when we were moving out here, we didn't know what to expect. We expected it to be like the Wild West. And back in those days, a lot of people carried openly.
I'll never forget when we first moved here. It sticks in my head. I was 10 years old. There was a guy down on Central Avenue riding a 10-speed. I don't know if you remember this, Scott. And he was wearing a pair of shorts and no shirt, and he had a gun on on his side.
I don't know, I might have.
It's back in 1972, and that was shocking to me because in New Jersey you'd be arrested for that.
Oh, little sidebar. Just reminisce real quick since you're bringing that kind of stuff up. Do you remember the guy that used to be going around Phoenix? You'd see him everywhere in the valley. North Phoenix, South Phoenix, West, East. We used to call him the walking dude.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that guy?
I'd always go, where are you going?
This guy, you saw him and Phoenix is a big city. It's a huge city.
He was all over the place.
This guy was in every nook and we used to see him all over, and you knew it was him because he always wore this long coat or jacket that had a hood. Yep. No matter what time of year it was, and he carried a walking stick.
Every once in a while, I'd roll down the window and yell, where are you going?
And he's got a beard, a full beard and mustache. He looked like he might have been like a prophet or something.
Do you know what's also weird? Is if you travel on I-40 from Albuquerque to Flagstaff, you go through the Indian reservation.
Yeah.
And you'll see Native Americans, Indians, whatever you want to call them, walking in the middle of nowhere. It's like, where are you going?
I know.
There's no water, there's no anything for miles and miles and miles. They're just on the side of the road, just walking.
But anyway,
get back. We got to get focused here.
But you could never get away with. I'm telling you what. I'm not saying that what happened at Charlie Hebdo in Paris couldn't happen in the U.S. because I guarantee you it's gonna happen. They're gonna, there's so much, the security's so tight at the airlines and stuff, they're not gonna do that again. They're gonna try something like this, but they're gonna do it over and over and over.
It's a disgrace that the French police are unarmed. I mean, you're law enforcement.
It is. I mean, how
they're on bicycles, unarmed. Really?
When
who are you trying to scare?
The criminals are in cars and they are armed, albeit they are driving Citroens and Renaults, but still they're cars.
I might mistake a cop for a newspaper boy.
Exactly.
On a bicycle.
And they all dress like Charles de Gaulle did in World War II.
But I'm sure they're wearing, Pierre Cardin police uniforms.
Oh my God!
But anyway, let's get back to the reaction, the hand wringing, the blame the victimhood we're seeing here. Eric Bates, you know who Eric Bates is? Eric Bates is the editor of Rolling Stone magazine, the same editor who allowed the University of Virginia rape stories to come out a month or so ago, which were totally fallacious and. Nobody did any background search on them. Just published them and basically what word am I looking for? Besmirched the names of a lot of these innocent guys who were in a fraternity. Mm-hmm. So the same guy gets on. I forgot who he was being interviewed by. I can't remember.
Oh, you said it earlier. I don't remember.
Anyway, he started comparing the reaction of these jihadis to Charlie Hebdo cartoons. He compared in the 1980s, back when Jerry Falwell was doing his thing. I don't agree with very much of Jerry Falwell, but Larry Flint was the publisher of the editor-publisher, whatever, of Hustler magazine, which is a pornographic, man's magazine.
And by the way, just so we're clear, in the interest of full disclosure, Larry Flint is scum.
He's definitely scum. He was shot too, and he was in a wheelchair. But anyway, and Larry Flint basically made comments. He slandered Jerry Falwell's talking about having sex with his mother in an outhouse, and he got real down and dirty. And anyway, Jerry Falwell sued him for slander and won, although it was overturned by a higher court. Anyway, this Eric Bates is trying his hardest to say, see, Christians do the same thing. Sorry, but litigating slander charge, someone who slandered you is quite a bit different than walking into an office building and mowing down 12 people with automatic weapons. Exactly. And he's trying to draw a moral equivalency between the two. But they try so hard. They want to say, see, Christians do it too. No, they don't, for the most part. Maybe there will be some. Yeah, there'll be some whacked out ones, but for the most part, I hate to use
like Jimmy Swaggart.
I hate to use the overused term, but not what is it? Not all Muslims are terrorists, but most terrorists tend to be Muslims.
Yeah,
and you can't say the same thing about Christians, Hindus, Buddhists. You just can't do it.
Well, someone in the last few days has said that every major religion has at one time in their history been violent and tried to spread their beliefs by violence, by the sword. But all have pretty much given that up, but for one.
Yes, and they always attack their neighbors. This is prophetic. I want to read you a couple quotes. This was taken from a journal called the Middle East Quarterly, and it's entitled "We Will Dominate You." But let me make a distinction real quick before you do that. And when we're speaking about that, we're talking about the militant Islam. We're not talking about Muslims every day. But however, their silence is sort of, almost
right. There's not too many in the U.S. that are speaking out. Waleed Faris is one. Zudi Jasser is another.
Well, here's what I can assure you: if a crazed fundamentalist Christian went and murdered a bunch of Muslims, you would see people coming out of the Christian world and just condemning it. You would see. Everybody would be coming out against
or a Jew.
Yes, but you don't. quite see it in the Muslim world. Anyway, this is from the Middle East Quarterly from December of 1999. It was entitled "We Will Dominate You." There's 3 points that they make in this that I find really fascinating. In a blunt statement that attracted some attention in Europe, Giuseppe Germano Bernardini, that's easy to say, a 72-year-old Italian who is Archbishop of Izmir, Turkey, wrote the Synod of European Bishops on October 13th, 1999, that Muslims have a clear program of expansion and reconquest of Europe. This is 15, 16 years ago. He then called on the Pope to convene a special Vatican meeting to find a common strategy toward Muslims living in Christian countries. This statement raised eyebrows because it so starkly contradicts the official church position. And he goes on to talk about how he's been living in Turkey for the last 42 years. And he said, during an official meeting on Islamic-Christian dialogue, an authoritative Muslim person speaking to the Christians participating at one point said very calmly and assuredly, quote, "Thanks to your democratic laws, we will invade you. And thanks to our religious laws, we will dominate you." Mm-hmm. And this is, he said very calmly, and he was, he's just basically making a statement of fact. And then he goes on to say, this Archbishop, he says, during another Islamic Christian meeting, always organized by Christians, a Christian participant publicly asked the Muslims present why they did not organize at least once a meeting of this kind. The Muslim authority present answered the following words: "Why should we? You have nothing to teach us, and we have nothing to learn." And then finally, this is really creepy, this one. In a Catholic monastery in Jerusalem, there was and perhaps still is a Muslim Arab servant. An honest and gentle person, he was respected greatly by the religious, who in turn were respected by him. One day he sadly told them, "Our chiefs have met and decided that all the infidels must be killed, but do not fear, because I will kill you without making you suffer." So, I mean, and these aren't even the radicals. If you read the Quran, which I haven't, but I've read excerpts of it.
Actually, I think they are the radicals. I think the thing is that they coerce other people to do their dirty work. Oh, the name of that woman that you were talking about, Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
I love her, and she's very brave.
She's from Mogadishu, Somalia.
She doesn't look so... Oh, that's...
Yeah, she does. Take a look at Sade. She's from Somalia, too.
Yeah, but she looks more Arab than... Sade, looks black, but...
I'm looking at a picture right now. She looks pretty...
Yeah, maybe.
African to me.
So, and then... love this. The Hollywood comedians are wringing their hands.
And might I add, with one exception, and this is significant, is Bill Maher. He's on the right side of this for
Yeah, I'm going to talk real briefly about Conan O'Brien and what's his name, Jon Stewart. Conan wasn't so bad. He said basically that have we entered this world where before I do my monologue, I have to stop and think before I say something funny, who I might offend? Well, guess what, Conan? That's been going on for a while now because of political correctness. And by the way, you're not the only target. Every American has a target on their back.
Well, he's Canadian, so you can understand his...
Whatever.
He's wimpy. That's what I'm saying.
You big puss. Everybody's a target, not just you, but somehow you're bringing yourself into the whole conversation, and you shouldn't be. And then Jon Stewart condemns what happens, but at the same time can't resist taking a swipe at religion. He says, we have to stop saying, when something like this happened in Paris today, we have to stop saying, well, we should not insult a great religion. First of all, there are no great religions. They're all stupid and dangerous. And we should insult them, and we should be able to insult whatever we want. That is what free speech is like. So, yeah, he basically said that's free speech, yet he managed to insult basically most of the world, depending on, he managed to insult every religion in the world. Mm-hmm. Now, let's take a look at his world where atheists run things, i.e. secular humanists, i.e. communists, who make killing, a science. Hundreds of millions of godless, the godless that he's talking about, atheist communists have murdered hundreds of millions over the course of 100 years, and that's and he likes to make it seem like, oh, it's all religion. It's all religion. It's
historical fact, folks. We're not making this up. Just look it up.
Yeah, I mean, there is 100 million easily. Mao did 50 to 60 million himself. He made Hitler look like a piker.
Of their own people, we might.
His own people. Well, that's part of the whole plan behind communism. It's totally anti-human, very anti-human. Which, speaking of communism, I don't want to go there right now, but I want to talk, if we have time, to talk about Venezuela. What's going on down there?
Okay.
Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's Jimmy Carter's
National Security Director.
Yes, National Security Director. Oh, he just wants to do a Neville Chamberlain. He just wants to just basically raise our hands.
And his daughter is on.
Yes, what's her name?
Is it Mika?
Mika Brzezinski.
Mika Brzezinski. She's on Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough on MSNBC, which has great ratings.
And you can tell where her DNA came from.
Oh, yeah.
It's appearing on today's Morning Joe. Joe, what's Scarborough.
Who calls himself a conservative.
I guess on.
No, he calls himself a conservative.
Well, on MSNBC, maybe he would be.
Yeah.
Anyway, appearing on today's Morning Joe, Jimmy Carter's former national security advisor criticized some of the satire directed at Islam as unnecessarily nasty and extraordinarily provocative. In that, I would agree. It is. I wouldn't do it, and it's not because I'm afraid of Islam, because it's just there's no point in it. He said that it was very important to avoid becoming the number one enemy of the fanatics. Brzezinski argued that we must not be engaged in anything that appears to be a struggle against Islam. And he criticized President George W. Bush for speaking of a war against jihadist terror. According to Brzezinski, jihadist terror to Islam, to Muslims, means just war. Could Brzezinski's approach work, or more likely would it be understood as a weakness that it is, giving that much more encouragement to the Islamic fanatics? Brzezinski goes on to say, we have to be patient and realize that this is going to be a long-haul challenge to us, and we also have to be very measured in how we conduct ourselves. The most important thing we have to do, in my judgment, is to avoid becoming the enemy number one of Islam in the eyes of the believers in the world of Islam. Huh? What do you think we are? We already are, just by virtue of being on this planet and believing in Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And being Americans or being whatever. We're already enemy number one. Mm-hmm. Anything that's not them is enemy number one. But this is where I have to go back and say, okay, are you just a useful idiot, willingly stupid? Excuse me, I hate to use the ad hominem attacks, but I don't know what else to say. Or are you complicit? What do you want? What do you exactly do you want? So 12 people get mowed down with automatic weapons, and we're just supposed to say, like on National Lampoon's Animal House, thank you, sir, may I have another?
Yeah, exactly.
Remember they're getting swatted? Thank you, sir, may I have another? Are we supposed to just thank them and say, oh, yes, we're dying all for Allah? What are we supposed to do? Yeah. We can't condemn the murderous, excuse my language, murderous bastards who just executed 12 people in cold blood. We can't condemn them? So he goes on, I think we have to draw clear lines and be patient and also be responsible. We have to preserve our rights, that is to say, freedom of expression and the freedom to express our views, but at the same time, we must avoid being provocative and unnecessarily nasty, because some form of humor directed at, for example, the Prophet in recent times in some publications in Europe were extraordinarily provocative. In other words, he's advocating limitations on free expression. Yeah, exactly. That's all he's doing. It's political correctness gone amok. And that is by design. Sorry, Zbigniew. I'm seeing behind your ugly little mask there. I know what you're doing. And you can try to be playing dumb and stuff, but it's pretty obvious.
It's like General Tom McInerney this morning on Fox News said, if we're not careful, political correctness is going to be the downfall of this country completely. It's going to destroy us.
And
it's on its way to it.
Does Islam take part in political correctness? No.
Nope.
It's like we're fighting a war with one arm tied behind our back.
They are a protected class.
So he goes on to say, we are democracies. We have the freedom of, we're not a democracy, by the way. We have the freedom of expression, but it doesn't do any harm to be measured even in humor and to avoid engaging in forms of humor and sardonic or whatever that then becomes profoundly offensive to the deepest religious motivations of people who are insecure, who are confronting modernity for the first time, who are easily interpret slights into offensive. But does that apply to slander against Christians? You can say anything you want.
Double standard. Huge double standard.
And I'm going to get into that in a second after I'm done with this. About, you want to talk about slanders to Christ and Christians? I got a few examples.
I listen to an internet radio station here in Phoenix, and on Saturday mornings between 3 and 6 a.m., I'm usually awake or in and out of sleep. They do a show called Cartoon World, which is by a husband and wife team that are in Wales. And she is actually an expatriate American from Detroit. And the first thing out of her mouth, she's still, she's been over there for years, but the first thing out of her mouth, she's one of those Americans that's just developed the accent, and you can always tell that they're not native born, kind of like Madonna. Well, Madonna put hers on, but anyway. Yeah, that's all. Anyway, but this woman, after being there for like 30 years, has developed somewhat of a British accent. And she says, if you don't like freedom of speech, then move to a country where they don't have it then. Yeah. That was the first thing out of her mouth today. And that about summed it all up. And that's true. If you don't like freedom of speech, get out. I'm going to say it now. Get out. We don't want you.
So Brzezinski goes on.
We don't need you.
He says that's point number one. He says point number two, as to the reaction to all of that, we have to avoid not overdoing what we do over there in the Middle East. One of the most important things in my mind is to avoid becoming the number one enemy of the fanatics, because that will turn the sharp edge of fanaticism altogether against us and will make it difficult to resolve the problems of the Middle East in such a fashion that the authentic moderates in the Middle East are effectively in charge. That ain't going to happen because there are no moderates.
Nope. At least in positions of authority.
Personally, I say leave the Middle East to its own devices except Israel and come back here to the United States, continue our fracking and producing our own oils. Excuse my language, screw and get, the Saudis and
get the frack out of the Middle East.
Because if there was no oil in there, nobody would care about your sorry ass.
And you know how we know this? Because 100 years ago, before they discovered oil, no one did care.
No, it was a hot, arid, sandy place that nobody wanted to go to.
Yep.
And you know
what? Everyone's trying to get out of.
And they're trying to kill the little state of Israel, who was given a similarly dusty, sandy little patch of land and turned it into an oasis. By the way, and they're trying to wipe them off the face of the earth.
And I got to look at it this way: out of all the countries in the Middle East, Israel is definitely the smallest. Sure, we help them out a lot, but if you guys are so big and badass, how come they're still around?
Because they're badass.
Exactly.
And by the way, did you see that one posting I did of the young people who serve in Israel's army, both male and female? Yeah. Just some of them strikingly, the women were beautiful and the men were really handsome. And I don't take that anything swishy, but
swishy.
But
Brian, are you out there listening?
But anyway, it was just I just found it really inspiring, that these young people, they look so, so healthy and young and vibrant. Anyway, he goes on, the conflict in the Middle East is a conflict for the soul of Islam. Will an authentic, self-assertive Islamic world be moderate, or will it be increasingly fanatical? The less we are engaged in anything that appears to be a struggle against Islam as such, the better off we'll be. Some years ago, the previous president spoke about the war against jihadist terror. And he's talking about George W. Bush. Jihadist terror to Islam, to Muslims, means just war, a fair war. The war of convictions. We're not waging a war against jihadist terror. We're not waging a war against Islam. We're simply first defending our own people when they get killed unfairly. And two, we're helping the countries in the Middle East prevail with moderate leadership at the helm. And I think those distinctions are fundamental, and that limits the scope of our engagement. So what do you do against an enemy that cuts the heads off of children? How does moderation combat that?
And one thing, two things we got to stop doing. Stop trying to, quote, spread democracy, because they're not going to care. They don't care about that. And number 2, stop nation building over there.
Okay, I want to go.
I think we should put all of them in a giant octagon and let them fight it out.
Or something. So we're talking, about Charlie Hebdo and, defiling the image of Muhammad or whatever he did just by actually drawing a picture of Muhammad. And you're sentenced to death.
How do you slander someone who's been dead for 1,500 years?
By saying he had a 9-year-old wife? Oh, he did. That's right.
But no, he's dead. By definition of the word slander, they've got to be alive.
But he did have a 9-year-old daughter.
No, he did.
I mean, wife.
He did.
Yeah. Oh, anyway.
I digress.
Yeah, let's talk about slandering somebody's prophet or their savior, perhaps Jesus Christ. Does anybody remember The Last Temptation of Christ, the movie?
Yeah, I never saw it, but I remember. That was back in the late 70s.
Oh, I think it came out a little later.
No, I was living in California when it happened. It was late 70s, no later than 1980.
Anyway, it depicted Jesus Christ as a serial adulterer and Mary Magdalene as basically a whore. Yeah, exactly. And it was a 2-hour-long movie, and how many people were killed as a result of that movie?
None.
Let me think. Hold on.
I know.
1 plus carry the 9 minus 0.
You're right.
None.
1988. I'm sorry.
Yeah. 0. Many people were offended, and you know what they did? They peacefully protested. They protested, in front of movie theaters, and they protested with their wallets by not going seeing that piece of what. So yes, our Savior gets slandered all the time. I mean, Bill Maher does it constantly. And a second movie was The Life of Brian. Brian.
I'm sorry, movie cracks me up.
That was a satire of Jesus Christ. It was this guy born near Christ at the time of Christ's birth and so forth, and they just basically made fun of Christ. And again, how many people died? Again, okay, carry the 7 minus 7, add 4, 0, none. Nope, not even close. No one even threatened to kill anybody.
Nope.
No.
But by the same token, what was the Mel Gibson movie?
Mad Max?
No.
Oh, it was Passion of Christ.
Passion of the Christ. That movie did gonzo box office, and when's the last time we saw one written about a movie made about Muhammad? Oh, that's right. Even if it was truthful, they couldn't depict him in films.
Well, I remember, getting back to the Passion of Christ, I remember the only people that were outraged were the non-Christians. They were
atheists and whatnot.
Atheists. They didn't like it. Oh, it was just
let the market figure it out.
Unneeded brutality and so forth. Well, you know what? The crucifixion was
and you had the same thing when the movie Gladiator came out. And I can remember Pat Robertson's son on the 700 Club one time said, I've got a lot of letters. People have condemned me for giving such good high marks to Gladiator because of the violence in it. Well, you know what? It wasn't gratuitous, and it was a rough time. In order to get the point across about the movie, you had to show a certain amount of violence.
Yeah, and that going into it. You don't want to see it, don't see it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were talking about the Passion of the Christ. Oh, so we got everybody protesting, not one of them being a Christian, and now you got the movies Noah. That's a total fiction, being made by an avowed atheist himself, and again, and they make Noah out to be this crazy drunk guy, and and again, how many people died because of that?
None.
No, 0, none. And the latest one is
Exodus, Gods and Kings.
Exodus. Which again is they portrayed these like the parting of the Red Sea as not divine, as basically didn't they try to make it into some scientific phenomenon?
There was a strong breeze that day.
Yeah, like, like the Great Flood was just really the creation of the
Okay, here's how it went.
Of the Black Sea.
Before they crossed, Moses is there. Okay, the Egyptians are chasing us. Let's figure out what our next move is. Aaron, any suggestions? Well, our meteorologist just said there's going to be a stiff breeze coming, but we got to time it just right. We're going to go at a certain speed through it. It's going to part the waters out of the way. We're going to get across just in time, in the nick of time, so that the waters will fall on the Egyptians.
But first, don't we have to traverse the rivers of blood before we even get?
No,
isn't
I don't recall that. That was the 7 plagues of Egypt.
But that
wasn't Joseph. That was Joseph.
Oh, Joseph. Okay.
Or the 12 plagues of Egypt, where all the water turned to blood.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what they're expecting us to believe. Okay, let's just say, for instance, it was a scientific explanation. How did Moses know it was going to happen at that place at that time?
Well, what they're basically saying, it didn't happen.
Right.
They're leading you on and saying, here, we're going to show you what the Bible tells you, but really we're going to, basically say, this really couldn't have happened. So today on Neil Cavuto, we had Bill Donahue of the Catholic League. He's not one of my favorite person, debating Joe Piscopo.
So it was Bill Donahue, the one that's the friend of, no, it's Bill Cunningham I'm thinking of, that's on Hannity. Billy Cunningham.
Yeah.
He's a radio talk show host. Okay, go ahead.
But anyway, right after the shootings in Paris, Cavuto had Donahue on, and Donahue basically, again saying, well, yeah, we believe in free speech, but I think that Charlie Hebdo, these are his words, pushed the envelope just a little too far. Well, he got a lot of flack for that. So he had to come back on Neil Cavuto today and do a lot of backpedaling. And Joe Piscopo was, you would have had to have seen this. Piscopo, his facial expressions, he was listening to Bill Donahue, and he was very polite to him and respectful to him, but he was just making these facial gestures. And basically, Donahue basically said he really didn't say what he said, and he did. He said, well, I didn't call for the execution of those people. No, but you said by pushing the envelope that it inferred that they were justified. What do you say when you say that the people were killed because they pushed the envelope too far? You're saying that they were justified in being slaughtered. Mm-hmm. But he backpedaled and said, no, that's not what I said. No, you didn't say that they were justified in being slaughtered. You said that they pushed the envelope too far. You can't get around that. You probably still believe that.
Yeah. He voted for Obama, didn't he?
I don't know.
Sounds like one of Obama's backpedaling.
Again,
things.
I don't mean any offense by any Catholics out there, but they tend to be liberals.
A lot of times,
A lot of times. If you ever get a chance.
Well, American Catholics, because in other countries they're not really. Like you go to Mexico
or Africa.
They're very conservative. They're very conservative. It's just in this country, it seems.
Now, we're sitting here wringing our hands over, what we should and we shouldn't say. And in Canada, yeah, this just happened. Well, this actually happened earlier in the year, but an anti-Islam protester has been jailed for 1 year after denouncing the Quran on a Toronto subway while holding an Israeli flag. His name is Eric Brazow. He's, I think he's 50 years old. Yeah, the 50-year-old who, he said Brazow wore Israeli colors and loudly condemned Islam and the Quran in July last year as tensions between Gaza and Israel boiled over into violence. The 50-year-old, who has previously been sentenced to 9 months in jail after handing out a flyer that vilified Muslims and disparages their religion, claimed the outburst had been part of a social experiment and that he wanted to promote debate amongst commuters. During one exchange, Brazow responded to a Muslim who said it had been nice to meet him by firing back, "It wasn't nice to meet you, and I hate and I don't like Muslims." Okay, not a nice thing to say, but should he? He was sentenced. He was jailed, and then he was in jail the whole time until his trial, and then he was sentenced to 12 months in prison for that.
Right.
Really? Okay.
But I mean, it goes back to what Patrick Henry once said. and when he was in the House of Burgesses in Virginia, he was debating with someone, and one of his colleagues just got done speaking. He says, "Sir, I may not agree with anything you say, but I will defend to the your right to say it."
Well, exactly, because tables can be changed at any time.
And folks, real quick, the First Amendment was put into place to defend unpopular speech.
Exactly.
Stuff we don't agree with.
It's like the Second Amendment was put in place to defend ourselves from our government.
To ensure the First Amendment was enforced.
which has been totally bastardized, but anyway.
Yeah.
Get this. He was refused bail and has since been behind bars for more than 7 months until Judge Gerald Lapkin convicted Brazow of the 3 charges, which included breach of the peace by interfering with Toronto Transit Service, causing a disturbance by using insulting language, and breaching his probation on the earlier hate-mongering conviction, handing Brazow a 20-month sentence minus 8 months for the time he has spent in custody. Before his trial, Lapkin said, "You had a ticket to ride, but not a pass to harass." Well, we live in a country here in the United States, thankfully, that what's the weirdo Christian cult that protests at the funeral of soldiers. What's his name?
Baptist Church.
I
forgot his name. North Hills or not North Hills.
They're in Kansas somewhere. They're just as despicable can get. They're just, I mean, they pick it. They call themselves Christian, yet they
Westboro
Baptist Church. Yeah, what was his name? That he's dead now.
I'll let you know in a second.
The father figure.
I'm looking up his name.
Yeah, but he's got every right to say it. I mean,
Fred Phelps. He passed away. It'll be a year on March 19th.
Oh, what a piece of work he was. I mean, these people, they make no sense of they're just evil. I'm sorry, they're not Christians, because the Christian people don't do what they do. They say things like, okay, I'm going to say this. It doesn't reflect anything that I feel. Fred Phelps used to say, "God hates fags," and they would hold up signs in front of funerals for whatever reason, funerals of slain soldiers that said that on them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and he has a right to do that, but he also has to suffer whatever consequences citizens, as long as they're within law. Citizens, as you can keep these people away from your functions. I think they have how many feet.
Oh, and by the way, they are not affiliated with any Baptist denomination.
No,
they've been denounced by the Baptist World Alliance and the Southern Baptist Convention.
They're from hell. They're evil.
The church describes itself as following primitive Baptist and Calvinist principles.
Do they do snakes and everything? I don't, that's weird too.
It reminds me of an old skit from Saturday Night Live. The snake handling O'Shea's. It was my family of snake handlers. For way back in the 80s, I think.
Piscopo on Cavuto today said, he said, in my days on SNL, I offended a lot of people. Should I have been killed for it? No. So, this kind of that brought back a memory of talking about SNL just now.
It was from season 2, episode 2. Norman Lear was the host.
What? Snake handling O'Shea's?
Yeah.
Well, you heard one of them died from the snake bite here a couple months ago. Yeah. One of those guys.
Yeah.
That's bound to happen. Now, what's the philosophy behind that anyway?
It's Boz Scaggs was a musical guest, by the way.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, it was basically there's in the Bible there's a passage that says, "I will not let any harm come to you, whether it be from the venom of a viper or something to that effect," that and everything. But you see, there's one thing.
So you tempt fate, right?
Exactly. No, you're tempting God is what you're doing. You're not tempting fate, you're tempting God.
I can't help but think God's looking down and going, what a bunch of morons. You remind me of the O'Shea's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was Norman Lear, Boz Scaggs, September 25th, 1976.
Oh, I bet you. Well, let me guess what song Boz Scaggs did. He did something from Silk.
I don't know. It doesn't say.
Silk Degrees, I bet you.
That's around when that album came out. I mean, there's not a. There's not a single song on that album that didn't suck.
Who did Bus?
I mean, there's not a single song on that album that sucked.
That was an awesome album. Who did Bus Skaggs play for before?
Steve Miller Band.
Steve Miller Band. A lot of people don't know that.
Yep. And I want to say he played for Santana a little bit too. But Steve Miller Band.
Oh, Santana lost a lot of good musicians. You know, half of them went to Journey.
Some might have gone to the Grateful Dead too. Who knows?
Well, we got a few minutes left. You want to switch topics briefly?
Sure.
I don't have. I'm all out of reference material, so I'm just. This is all
Winging
off. Huh?
Winging it now.
I'm winging it now. Venezuela. They're having food shortages. Surprise! What do you think happens in communist societies?
Yeah.
And of course, my leftist buddies chime in. They're a socialist. Okay. What's the difference between,
not a lot,
you know, sky blue and blue? You know, they're just varying shades. You know, the reason why they're having shortages is because they have price controls.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have toilet paper. People are waiting in line. They're waiting in line for hours just getting things like toilet paper and diapers for their kids and food to eat and so forth. What did you expect with communists?
I just watched yesterday. I watched the Atlas Shrugged Part 3, the final installment of the Atlas Shrugged trilogy. And they're going on about, in case you don't know the premise behind Atlas Shrugged, folks, it's where all the people who are champions of industry, who actually create something with their ideas they have, who actually do these things in order to better society, they get tired of people taking from them, of government regulating them because they have to be fair and everything, and they just decide to all go on strike, and they just disappear and go off to their own little valley in Colorado. And it's about how practically all of them are gone now, and the government sees the solution as being nationalizing everything. And once they do, everything, guess what, starts falling apart. The railroads, the only thing that was still running well was Taggart Transcontinental, which was the railroad company that's center of the movie, or the movie and book, whatever. And they were actually having conversations, and it'll chill you to the bone, but I don't think it's so far-fetched in today's world. They're having conversations about, in order to save the whole, we got to cut off a few limbs. In other words, cutting off supplies by train to Minnesota for a whole state.
What did Stalin say? Making an omelet, you break a few eggs.
Yeah. Is he the one that came up with that?
I think it was Stalin. Could have been Lenin.
But I mean, it just to even think that, you know, it's amazing.
Well, what does communism produce? Misery.
Yep.
Misery and shortages.
Yep.
And what they've done is a brilliant job of saying things like, workers of the world unite. Oh, gosh, doesn't that make you warm and fuzzy? But you know what? What happens in a communist society? You have a very small, very wealthy elite at the top, which we're beginning to see here in this country, and everybody else. And you know who the enemy is instead of the rich elite? It's the bourgeoisie. Who's the bourgeoisie?
That's the middle class.
That's the middle class. So the enemy is the middle class, the people that actually really make the world go round and allow even poor people in this country to live a fairly decent life. Big screen TVs, they all have cell phones, they got cars, they live a decent life. But that, in a communist society, doesn't exist.
Oh, by the way, can I give you a quick synopsis of the snake handling O'Shea's?
Yeah.
Norman Lear was the guest host. Lear himself discusses his very personal relationship with writer Tom Schiller, who discusses the new sitcom pitch with him. The snake-handling O'Shea's features a union organizer, father, played by John Belushi, his boss/wife, played by Jane Curtin, a nun for a daughter, played by Lorraine Newman, and gay state trooper of a son, Dan Aykroyd. Also, they're all practicing snake handlers. This is a clever sketch, and I also enjoyed how it didn't turn Aykroyd into a stereotypical lispy gay character. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that used to go on Saturday Night Live. You never knew what to expect.
You know what? That's fine because, sorry, snake handlers. It's just a little bit. That's out there, man. You know, it's not the same as basically calling Christ a serial adulterer and Mary Magdalene a whore. You know. these are people that they're ridiculing these people, and rightfully so. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You don't walk around with tempt fate with vipers and rattlesnakes.
Sometimes just saying to a group of people like that, saying you're bad, you're wrong, turns people off. But if you do it in such a way as to make them kind of laugh at other people, have people laugh at and see the ridiculousness in it, maybe other people would come around to your way of thinking, whatever it may be.
So we got about 5 minutes left. And if something big doesn't happen this week, this is what I'm going to talk about here briefly next. Hopefully we can do a kind of a show on it next week because it's pretty relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Hillary Clinton's pissed off.
Uh-oh. When is she not?
She's mad at Bill.
Uh-oh. When is she not?
Because
someone's got a sour place in there, I swear.
Bill has been seen with the pedophile Epstein. You know, the guy that procures young underage girls for sex with Prince Andrew. You mean the royals? The royals do that too? Uh-oh. And Bill Clinton and Alan Dershowitz is even rumored. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah,
Alan Dershowitz. I don't see that. I'm not. Yeah, I don't either. That doesn't seem right.
But I think that Hillary's always pissed off at something. She just has to find a new target for.
So apparently, he was waiting in front of church the other day for her to show up at the. I think it was at the slain policeman's funeral, and she showed up and she just walked right past him, didn't even acknowledge him.
Did she wear a black pantsuit?
I don't know, but something tells me she's like that anyway. On any given day. In fact, there were rumors during the presidency that if you were a staffer in the White House and Hillary Clinton was walking down the hall, you got out of you literally, if there was a door, you went in there and shut the door. She did not like anybody giving her eye contact, didn't like anybody acknowledge her. She didn't like to be looked at at all. But anyway, getting back to this thing with Bill, and the pedophiles. I'm not saying Bill's a pedophile. I'm just saying that he was known to be friends with this guy, as was Prince Andrew. What I want to, if not next week, one of these weeks, I want to talk about how prevalent it is and how pedophilia is amongst the rich and powerful. It is. And I got data to back it up.
And at one time, so was hemophilia.
Yeah. Well,
100 years ago or more.
Well, yeah.
Great families in Europe.
And if you really want to get it into the reason, well, we can open up that genie's bottle too.
Yep.
So
Yep. There's always lots to talk about, folks.
It's some of you are probably going to go, oh, this guy is crazy. But,
okay, okay, folks. Okay. We go out of our way to research stuff. We go out of our way to educate ourselves and read stuff. Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist and that we're crazy.
No, because a lot of you are living one-dimensional lives, and you're just a product of what you're spoon-fed. What?
No, it just...
What, I insulted our audience?
You might have to some. I don't know.
Well, if you're not thinking outside of the box, i.e., outside of what you're told on a daily basis, well, then...
And I'm telling you, folks, even 5 years ago, if you would have told me 5 years ago that in 2015, some of the things that are happening right now are going to be happening, I would have said you're crazy also.
Yep.
Nothing surprises me anymore.
Nope. A lot of deception. A lot of deception out there, too.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if, for some reason, Pee Wee Herman won an Oscar this year as a write-in.
So I'm not.
Sorry.
That was loud.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
I don't mean to. I'm not going to be an odds maker on this, but what do you think the odds are this week of something like what we saw in Paris this week happens again? The MI5 came out and said that a big one's coming.
I think it's going to happen, and I don't know if it's going to happen this week, but I'd give the odds at. I'll give it 60-40 that it will.
So you think some of our personal liberties will be taken away after it happens?
If it happens in this country, who knows? I think there will be a big uproar about it if it does.
Well, people, after 9/11, we don't have the same personal liberties now that we had prior to 9/11.
No, we don't.
We get groped at the airport. We got TSA agents.
Pornographic X-ray machines.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that's it for this week, folks. We'll talk to you next Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to go watch some football now, guys. So have a nice weekend. Talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.